So we are on the seventh session in dealing with aging, and each session is surprising to me because, I've not taught this seminar before. I didn't write it ahead of time. Instead, I just kind of go prepare for each time. And of course, the second time through, if I did it somewhere else, it'd be a lot easier because I've gone through it and have all the material. So I'm not ever really sure exactly how it's going to come out. And the surprise for this session is I started out with the idea of dealing with the problem that every couple has, in that normally one of them precedes the other in death. So that leaves a survivor. And suddenly we have, a survivor where there was a couple. For example, my wife and I, we've been married 59 years. One of us, more probably, unless we were killed in an auto accident and both died together, more than likely, one of us is going to be the survivor of the couple. And I just want to parenthetically say, from my years of work in hospice, and this is just from my observation, this is not dealing with any data. My observation is that women are much better prepared to be the survivor than men are. Men just don't do as well. It's much harder for them. So having said that, I thought that, I would have a session on being the survivor. And then when I got into it, I discovered that it was a far bigger issue than that. That's only one facet of being alone. And in fact, the issue affects young people as much as it does old people. Loneliness is a huge problem in our society, no matter what your age. So I thought I would just modify the session to include loneliness in general. And what I found in my studies of the data was that studies have shown that many couples living together, whether they're married or not, many couples, one of them is lonely. Sometimes both of them. Living together, being married, feeling alone. It's kind of hard to get your arms around the idea, but that's true. And there are a lot of people like that. So I thought I would have a session that would deal with all of it together. Thus, I have 3 handouts to deal with that. Before we go to that, looking at the schedule, I see that next month, it's this month, it's next month, October 29th, is session 8, which is on faith. And that is one of the few times in which we're not talking about loss, because most of our sessions have been talking about loss. But here we have something that is not talking about loss. And then on November 19th, planning ahead, which is going to deal with our estate, and that was brought home to me in a very real way during this seminar, during this year. We're spending a whole year putting this seminar on. I had to deal with an estate where someone did no planning. And oh my, what a mess that is. Because if you don't plan, there are bureaucrats who are just rubbing their hands together who'll step right in and make life miserable for whoever's left. And so I was left with this estate, and I wasn't even a relative. Not even related, but because of the law, I was sucked into this situation. And it was my responsibility to find anything that the person, the decedent, owned that was worth $700 or more. I was required by law to hire an auctioneer to auction off that item, and then at my expense, and I then had to take the proceeds from that auction and send it all to the state of California. I'm not even related to the person. How did that happen? I rented a little apartment to him. And because we had a business relationship, it fell on me. So you got to have plans, folks, for the end. You have to have plans for when you leave this earth and what happens to everything, because there are laws that come into play, and it can cause all kinds of disruption. Then we're going to go from estate planning on November 19th to our last session, which is counting our treasure. And I wondered how we're going to do that. What are we going to say at the end of 10 sessions, almost a whole year of loss? Well, we've talked about this loss and that loss and discovered that old age is really about loss. Well, then Ruth Ann Needham came along last month and put a book in my hands, and I read the book and I found the answer. I tell you, here it is. And you will be given a copy of this book. I have already bought it for you. I have 35 copies of this book. And I'm going to give you a copy because this is it, folks. This is how you deal with old age. This is how you live through it. And not just survive it, but how you're happy. I just couldn't recommend it enough. So you got some good things coming down the pike for you. And now let's go to the handouts. The one handout we have is 12 ways to embrace living alone. Notice that we have 12 ways and 5 problems and 7 things. And so it's easy to tell them apart. Now, this is the handout that I would use with younger people. This is particularly for people of any age, but looking at young people. And so you can take that just as a resource. You probably don't fit into the under 40 category. I mean, really, somebody's in their 60s. I, from my point of view, that's young now. I just think, wow, that's only in their 60s. And then we have the 5 problems. Well, the 5 problems comes from the Living Well Alone project. And those are problems that people are going to have living alone, whether you're young or old. And those, again, this is a resource for you to read on your own. And you might wonder about the project, the Living Well Alone project. Well, what I've discovered is there are hundreds of projects, thousands of foundations and projects dealing with old age and the problems people have. And they have all produced such magnificent things. Like the first handout we had for young people, that was from the United Healthcare. And this one is from the Living Alone project. And then we come to our third handout, which is the 7 tips. And I've got a little different cover. You don't have the cover to save ink. This is another project that I discovered. And this is really for people in old age. And this is what I had envisioned when I started this out. And it's from the Second Wind movement. When I first heard of the Second Wind movement, I thought maybe it was like people who are runners or something, you get your second wind. And it's true. I was a runner, and you reach that point where suddenly, you're over the hump and you're in your second wind and you're really barreling along and doing fine. So that's what this movement is about, how to recover as you get into old age and find your second wind. So we're going to start with that. And we'll just we'll go through the handout, and then we'll have some time to talk and to share. So 27% of Americans age 16 over are living alone. Well, that's a lot of people. A quarter of the population are living alone. And only about a dozen other countries in the world have this high percentage of older adults living alone. And let's see, this November, it'll be my 30th trip to Australia in November. And one thing you notice about Australia, it's a far younger country. And I don't know how that can be. I mean, demographically, how does that work out? The population is younger. I don't know how that works, but it is. And they don't have some of the problems that we have. They don't have the same statistics. Living alone after 60 doesn't have to equate with loneliness or isolation. It's all about how we choose to leverage it. It's all about how we make decisions in life that affect the quality of our life and what we do. And we'll be going through some of those things. So here's some of the ways that we can embrace the solo lifestyle and thrive in our 60s and beyond. And the first way is practice mindfulness. So I looked up mindfulness to try to get an idea, because we're going to define it, and we'll use some of their definitions, and I want to give you some of mine. If you Google it, you'll find things like mindfulness is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment. And the idea of the present moment is the operative idea there. The idea that it's that present moment that we're really bearing down on with our mind. So rather than just going through an experience or a time or like coming to church, and kind of like what Pastor Sean was talking about, how easy it is to just go, you sing the song and you don't even think about it, but when you do start thinking about it, suddenly those words really become meaningful to you. That's mindfulness. Another simple explanation of mindfulness is being aware. And one scholar said mindfulness is a cognitive skill. So that's a thinking skill. So mindfulness, and we'll come into some more definitions here in a moment, is proven to reduce loneliness and isolation by allowing individuals to develop an appreciation of their experience in the present moment. It can also help you build beneficial practices that increase emotional regulation and cultivate greater resilience, so you're able to bounce back. And resilience comes into play, for example, in grief work. When in hospice, I was involved in grief a whole lot. And so when a spouse passes away, especially if it's suddenly, where the survivor is just overwhelmed by these waves of grief, because there was no time for anticipatory grief, no time to know that it was coming, no time to prepare oneself, and sometimes there was like no time to even say goodbye. Oh my, how important it is for that person then to be able to express their emotions and to be able to cry and to be able to work through those emotions and be able to tell the story over and over again, so that he or she is able to begin to process that grief and then finally be able to break through to what I call emotional resilience, where suddenly you have that acceptance coming in, so you can talk about it and you don't have that deep grief that you had. It's a grief you'll never get over when you lose your spouse. We know that. I've not lost a spouse, but from my work with people, I know that's true. You never really get over it, but the nice thing with emotional resilience is you get through it. And so you can once again pick up the shreds of life and carry on with the broken pieces that fell to your feet. And you can put them back together again, and you can carry on with life because you've achieved that emotional resilience. So that's all part of mindfulness. Now, fretting about which mindfulness activity to pursue, well, they say here, it doesn't matter what you do in mindfulness, whether you're journaling, meditating, doing Tai Chi or Qigong or any of these other things. I'm sure you've been to San Francisco too, to the park, and you see these people who go out there and they have this rigmarole they go through, and they this way and that way, and it's for an onlooker it doesn't make much sense, but for a participant who has learned the art, it's very meaningful and very centering, and it prepares them for their day, and it helps them to deal with grief and many other issues. It's a way of centering. And so that's mindfulness, of taking the present moment and living within the present moment and making it meaningful to you. So if you go to the next page, you'll see the chart they give of mindfulness and how to practice it. Journaling is psychologically healthy, so healthy. And it's a new skill for many people. They've never journaled in their life, where you're able to cognitively make yourself aware by putting into words and writing them down what is in your mind and what your issues are and how you're feeling and how you're doing and why you're feeling that way. And so that then you have that great ability to go back over the months and reread what you wrote, and you can see your progress. You can see that you're making lineal progress with whatever issue it is. In grief work, we feel that we're going in circles, but in reality, it is a straight line thing. It's a straight line with a lot of wobbles, because you keep coming back to the same grief again. But in the end, you're making progress, and you can see that when you journal. You can practice meditation. Well, I don't know about you, but for me to sit in the lotus position at the edge of the continent near San Francisco, looking out over the Pacific Ocean and seeing the sunset, well, first of all, I'd probably have to get the fire department to unpretzel me sitting in the lotus position. And secondly, it would hurt my back, and it wouldn't be comfortable at all, and I wouldn't be thinking about anything else except my back hurts. So that's not going to work for me. But the point of what we're saying here is that find one thing that works. A morning routine, for example, can help. A morning, that sounds silly, doesn't it? But a morning routine where you get up and there's certain things that you do, like most common would be exercises. This is before you even brushed your teeth or anything else. You get up and you do this morning routine, and that becomes kind of like a way of preparing your body and your mind for the new day. And then exercise. Well, there's nothing like exercise if you've discovered it. But I'm the first to tell you that some people just don't believe in exercise. And it just doesn't work for some people. My brother, who was 2 years older than me, had a big button that he wore, and it said, "Fight physical fitness." He was against exercise. I mean, it just didn't work for him. And when I was in high school, I was running track, and so I came home from college. I was running track, and I'm on vacation. My brother decided he would go to the track with me, and he was in college too, and get into shape. And so he went and did a workout with me, and next day he was so sore he could hardly walk, and he was so hungry he ate like a horse, and he was trying to lose weight. So for some people, exercise doesn't work, but for a lot of us, it does. And for me, for example, I swim, and I'm lucky I do, because I couldn't run now. I mean, I can hardly walk because I have some spinal issues going on, and I'm just trying to keep my walking going so I don't end up in a wheelchair. But I have spinal stenosis, and now I have spinal degeneration, and I've got spinal arthritis, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. It doesn't get better. But there's something about finding an exercise that you can do that says to myself, it's a way of me saying to myself, I'm not throwing in the towel. And I found something that I can do, and for me it's swimming. Now for somebody else, who knows what it can be for exercise. But find some exercise that you can do, and that it's refreshing isn't the word. It's renewing. It renews the heart and mind and the body. I feel good when I get done, and it just renews my mind. For me, swimming is a way of mindfulness. And the wonderful thing about the exercise is that you can get out there and you can do that exercise while you're thinking about what your issues are. So it becomes very, very helpful. And I couldn't exercise. Exercise is wonderful, and I know it's harder and harder as we get older, but we've got to find something that we can do. And I've seen classes of wheelchair patients doing exercise classes for people in wheelchairs, and it does them a world of good. So focus on your goals, your core values, and your vision, and I do that when I'm swimming. Of course, sometimes when I'm swimming, that's not the place for it. I mean, if I'm in a swimming race, I've got my mindfulness is on the race, because I can't start thinking about anything else, because you lose it. You don't even know what lap you're on. So there's a place for it. Reconnecting with nature. Well, I love to go bird watching, and the great thing about a lifetime of bird watching is it has brought me to so many beautiful places. My wife and I, she was 19, I was 21. I took her on our first date, and we went bird watching. And she fell in love with bird watching. And that has been our common theme in our marriage for 59 years. We have gone bird watching on every continent except Antarctica, and to some beautiful places. And you can't help but reconnect and recenter when you go to these beautiful places. Now, limit screen time. You know, I don't go to movies very often. I only go to a movie if it was really highly recommended to me by people that I trust. So here's my history. I did go and see Dr. Zhivago, and that was a few years ago, wasn't it? Yeah, Dr. Zhivago, that was a good movie. And then I went and saw one more recently, Schindler's List. I saw that at the theater. So how many years ago was that? Decades ago. Why don't I go to movies? I just am uncomfortable giving away my mind to a movie maker to lead me where I don't know where we're going. I'm just not comfortable. I don't want to give them that time. And so I have negative feelings towards movies unless it's highly recommended to me. Do I watch television? Yeah, we watch the news every night. But you have to realize that with the screen, it can soak up so much of your time. So what would I rather do with my time? Well, I would rather do something creative on the computer. That would be fun. Looking things up or working on projects. I'm involved in different kinds of things. I tell you about my 58-year-long bird watching project at Lake Matthews. There's all kinds of things you can do on your own time. Reading books is still a good thing to do. I know it's a little old-fashioned these days, but read. And if you can't read, you can get the books on audio now. There's so many places. It's wonderful. So I limit my screen time, and I think that I benefit from it. I think by and large it's helped me. I know that I'm really out of it. I'm not like Pastor John, who can tell you about movies because he sees them and he understands them, and music and things like that. And I'm not there. That's just not me. We're all different, and we have to respect that. So it's essential on page 4. It's essential to create good routines that keep you healthy and happy, whatever they happen to be for you. Because the routines that make me happy might not be the routines that make you happy. But you've got to use your mind in the present moment to figure out what it is that makes you happy. What can I do that I like to do? And if you ever reach the point where you can't think of anything that you could do that would bring you enjoyment, then you need counseling. Because then you're at a point where life is just gray. And that's depression. So the third paragraph, research suggests that living alone is linked to unhealthy eating habits and excessive screen time. Those two go together. Would you rather be sitting on the couch eating potato chips, drinking a bottle of beer while you watch the game? Or would you rather go out for a brisk walk? Or maybe you can still ride a bike, or maybe you can swim, or something else outside that you like to do. Maybe it's just gardening. But oh my, those are such basic choices that we make in life with such huge ramifications. Because what we choose is going to proscribe what we do. It's going to steer us, it's going to bless us, or it's going to curse us. And so those are choices that's just strictly up to us. Bottom of the page 4 talks about routines, getting healthy routines, retirement routine. Yeah, what are you going to do when you retire? We've already covered that. Boy, that was scary for me. I didn't know how it would go. I really didn't. I was a little fearful. That's why I worked so late. I enjoyed my work so much. I was fearful of not having that work, not having that enjoyment. What would I do? But then when my brother died, that got my attention. And so at 73, I started making plans for retirement. It took me 2 years to step out of 3 jobs. And I did it. And I tell you, retirement for me has been the happiest time of my life. There's nothing like it. It is such a blessing that I have my free time. I can do what I like. And I tell you, I'm busier now than I was then, I think. So then it talks about your morning routine and your evening routine. Well, the idea here is just to have things that are like crutches. You know, if you hurt your knee, and I did once, I broke my patella. And boy, being on crutches, that was no fun. It was just like 2 pain sticks under your arms trying to get around. I'd never been on crutches in my life. But they helped me get around. Morning routines, evening routines can be crutches to help you if you need that in your life. If you need that stability. The fact is, if there's certain things you do in the morning or certain things you do in the evening, it can give some structure to your life that maybe helps you make good decisions. And you've got to figure out, using mindfulness, looking at the present moment, you've got to figure out what it is that triggers your happiness and what it is that triggers your being bad. And if there are certain things that don't help you, then you've got to cut those things out because that's not going to help you. And you try to magnify the things that do help you. Page 5. Number 3, identify when you feel lonely. So what is it that brings loneliness into your life? For most of us, I could just guess that for 75% of us, we would say that one of the things we could mention that brings us loneliness into our lives is holidays. Because holidays stir up precious memories. And it's not like it used to be. We used to meet every Thanksgiving at my mother's house, and she was the matriarch of the family. All the children, grandchildren, we all met there. That was just expected. Well, she demanded it. I mean, if we didn't show up there, it was like the aliens just invaded. I mean, it was just, you couldn't have it that way. And so rather than face her ire, we all showed up at Thanksgiving at her house. It was the easiest way to do it. But we came to cherish those times. And they're forever gone. So Thanksgiving for me is a time that brings up feelings of loneliness. Even though I have these wonderful memories it's still, I feel so alone. You know, she's gone. So many others are gone. And the older we get, the more we lose of family, and the more our losses of our friends as well. So holidays are a time. But then you got to think about what other things that happen in life make you feel like you're alone. And you try to identify those things, because if you can identify those things, you can deal with them. But if you can't identify them, you don't know what they are, because you haven't used mindfulness. You haven't used your mind in the present moment to place yourself in this lonely place to figure it out. What is it that makes me lonely? What is it? So loneliness is something that must be identified. Recognizing the signs of loneliness as soon as they arise, so you can take quick action. And then also you have to try to go into your mind to differentiate between loneliness and isolation. We've got a chart here that'll help us with that. And on page 6, I thought this was a helpful differentiation. Like the list of under isolation, you can think of these things actually as triggers. That when one lives alone, that certainly can trigger a sense of isolation and brings on loneliness. We wish for more friends. We live alone. No close relatives. Never visits anyone, never leaves the house. No contact with neighbors. No phone or digital chat. Alone for 9 hours or more a day. Those are all triggers for isolation. Now, we can't avoid loneliness because it's part of the human condition, but we can learn to live with it and to channel it. But we can avoid isolation. We don't have to be isolated. So we have to identify what the factors are that make us isolated, and then we have to take steps to mitigate these factors. And as a pastor, of course, I'm always delighted to point out that coming to church is one of the greatest things you can do for yourself, because you're not isolated. And of course, you could stay home and watch it on TV, which my wife and I have done quite a bit. And she would be doing it now, but she's home and she wouldn't remember to do it, I'm afraid. There's something about coming to church that puts you back into the pool of humanity, into the pool of friendship. It puts you back into this atmosphere, the situation of nurturing, where you're with people who you know and who love you, and where you're hearing positive words of encouragement for life, and you're hearing things from a biblical perspective that tells us how we should be living. And that's what we get from going to church. So for young people who are so busy with their children and their soccer games and they don't have time to go to church, well, they're missing out putting what I call deposits into their spiritual bank account. And I always tell young people, that's anyone younger than 40, that you can be a millionaire when you're 80. All you have to do is use the greatest gift, the greatest thing that you have, and that's time. Time magnifies investment. So if you start investing when you're 30 and you put $50 a month into a mutual fund, by the time you're 65, you'll have more than $1 million. I mean, it's unbelievable the way the time magnifies investment. Or how about real estate? Just try to save up and buy an extra house or a property and rent it out. And 35 years later, sell it and reap the profits. When I was working out in the desert, and I was working for a hospice in Yucca Valley, a fire department in 29 Palms, and I was also pastoring a church in 29 Palms. 3 jobs, all at the same time. And it was a lot of work. I worked for 20 years. I didn't have a day off. When I figured out that was a loser, so I started taking 1 day off a week anyway. But what I discovered through all of that was that I had to have a place out there because I had to stay overnight. Sometimes I'd get called out in an emergency in the middle of the night, and then I have to go to work at one of my 3 jobs. Oh, yeah. So we bought a FHA fixer-upper. Well, that was fun. It wasn't because we had all this, this great real estate acumen. I knew how to be a good businessman. Nothing like that at all. I needed a place to sleep. So we signed up for a $75,000 house in 30 years ago, more than that, 35 years ago. And just a year ago, January, we sold it because we don't need it anymore. And so this, for $75,000 house, guess what we sold it for? $675,000. We made $600,000. Time is the greatest asset that young people have. So for those of us who are older, we don't have time anymore, but we still have life. And in order to be successful in life, we have to look at the greatest asset that we have, and that asset is friendship. The idea that we have support, that we don't live alone. Don't become isolated. If you become isolated, you allowed yourself to be isolated. Don't do that. You've got to break out of that, and then just deal with the factors of loneliness on the other side. If you don't have enough close friends, develop some new ones. I just made friends with the neighbors that live behind us. They lived there 12 years. I didn't even know their name. And I decided that it was about high time I did. And so I went over there last year, and now we're good friends. And when our electric goes out, which it's been doing regularly, I run an electric cord from my house over to theirs and give them power, because we always have power, because I put in a whole house generator. It generates 24,000 kilowatts. I've got enough for our house and his house too. So friendship, we don't have time. We might have money, might not have money, but we can all have friendship. And that friendship is so important as we get older. So in the middle of page 6, it says, being aware of your emotional state allows you to find practical and creative solutions to alleviate your loneliness. And boy, how true that is. Then to sum up, living alone after 60 doesn't have to mean living a sad, solitary life. And when you're tuned into the nuances of your emotions, knowing the difference between isolation and loneliness and your triggers for each will help. Okay, then stay connected. Page 7. Look at the difference in this survey that shows common mental problems of older people and the difference between those who live alone and those not living alone. So living alone, higher incidence of mental problems and higher incidence of all kinds of problems, emotional problems, problems of health, because living alone makes you more susceptible to these problems. We need to be connected with people. That's the way we're made. Okay, page 8. Now, at number 5, keeping it clean, I thought was a little odd. I never thought about that, because we tend to be messy at our house. But I discovered not too long ago a lady who is an organizer, and I hired her. And she came and organized things for me. Not everything, but a lot of things. She charges $25 an hour, and she's incredible. That's all you can say. Her ability to organize is just absolutely wonderful. And I do feel better about some things because of that. So you can read that about the idea that if your house is cluttered, that you're emotionally cluttered. I don't know really what to think about all that, but anyway, it's part of the presentation here. Number 6, consider a companion. I'll tell you about Alice. That's not a real name. She lived next to my mother for 10 years. I knew Alice. I knew her from her mid-70s to her mid-80s, and she couldn't live alone, and she always had a new boyfriend. The boyfriend would last anywhere between a month and 3 months, and then she'd kick him out. She couldn't live without a boyfriend. And I mean, the boyfriends she chose were not like hunks or anything. I don't know. It's just, I couldn't believe it was happening, but that's the way some people are. They got to have somebody. Well, this idea that they're throwing out is not that. It's a companion, which means a pet. And they're talking about a dog. But then you could have a cat, or you could have a guinea pig, or a turtle, or a snake. You could have anything. And then they say, well, if you don't want plants, look, read what it says there. If you don't want dogs, try plants. Plants can be companions. I know that I've read this before. There are people who play music to their plants, and they say it helps the plants grow better. So you can have your choice. The concept is you need a companion of some kind. And on page 10, you'll see the chart showing the benefits of having a companion. And my mother always lived with a dog. She was a widow from age 39 until she died at 88. And she was used to living alone, but she always had a dog. And she always said to me, she'd say, Craig, he isn't a person, but he's somebody. And that meant she went home to somebody. She never went home to an empty house. So it works, folks. And I'm not there. I've always had a dog too, but I've never had to live alone up until this point. Number 7, pursue your passions. Whatever your passions are. It's really great when you're retired that you have time to do what you want to do. And so do it. Don't just sit there and watch TV. Do it. Get involved in something. The more involved you are in something that you enjoy, the better off you're going to be. It's a very simple idea. And you can volunteer here at church. How about on, Halloween, handing candy out there? That's a pretty neat idea, to give candy to children, to bring a little joy like that. And I don't know if the American Dental Association hands out free candy for children. Hopefully it would rot their teeth more, and that way they'd get more business. I don't know. But my dentist, Dr. Voss, do you remember Dr. Voss? Edna Voss's husband, he gave away a lot of candy. And he was a dentist. I used to laugh. Okay, then page 12, thriving alone. Kaiser has that theme, thrive. Boy, what a great theme, thrive. That's what we want to do as old people. We want to thrive. We want to be not just able to say that we're surviving being old, but that we're thriving being old. There are so many pluses to it. And we're going to bring that out in our last session, session 10. Look at all the positives that we have to growing old. And that's what caused this book to be written by John Leland. What John Leland did, he went and interviewed the oldest people he could find for a year. Same people. He had a whole, like 20 of them. And that's all he did all year. He went from one interview to another. And he followed them for a year. And then he wrote down what he found. And these are people in their 90s. And people up, in their early hundreds. And he wrote down what he found, and it's astounding. They're thriving. And that's what we got to do. We've got to break through all of the losses of aging and thrive. And it goes beyond the fact that our kids don't come to see us, or our grandchildren ignore us, or this piece of brokenness or that piece of brokenness. It's beyond all of that. It means our whole life, taking our whole life and not just being successful, but thriving. Okay, now we have a lady here who I can never remember her name. It's a little unusual, but I'll tell you about this lady. She's been in business. Come up here. She's been in business all her life, okay? And for some reason, she has the ability to come up to me after every session and make a comment that is so profound that you should hear it. She just has that ability to analyze and say something really, really valuable. So I introduce you to her.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hold it more like that.
Oh, okay. I was around, I think, 55 years old, and my husband got very sick, and he was sick for a long time. So it kind of prepared me that, well, gradually he's going to go. So it didn't happen sudden. But the day he left, and a friend of mine came to just stay with me, help, well, just give me company and take care of the procedure. And she asked me, Ramila, what are you going to do now that he's gone? And I said, well, I'm going to get up and be my own self. Now I will take care of myself and become who I really am. And we went out to lunch, and she said, how are you going to start your new life? She was a professor at Valley State College. Valley State College? Yeah, okay. And she said, there are many, many classes there. Why don't you go and join them? And she was a professor of health, like, anyway, my English is not very good. And so next day, I go to Valley State College, look at the program, and I signed 3 or 4 classes. And I just start going to those classes. And that took care of my loneliness in the daytime. But when I come home in the evening, it was very hard to get inside the house. It was lonely. There was nobody waiting for me. And then I started joining evening classes and all, and started writing journal and inviting people, going out, what creative writing, and that's how I took care of my loneliness, and I didn't feel that sadness. There was grieving, but it took care, and talking to people about what happened to me also helped me to release my grieving and sharing with people. Thank you.
Thank you. It's your opportunity to share now. Anyone want to share?
Just a comment of couples that are together but living alone. Seems to me it's a kind of a natural progression of life. After you've lived with a person for a while, you know what the habits of the other individual are. And for example, I watch college football on Saturdays. Nelda knows that. She leaves me alone. She lets me do that. I know that she has things that she does. And it just, after living alone a while, that seems to be a natural way to do things. Most of the guys have a little place where they, a man cave of their own that they've made. So they have the plaques on the wall and the pictures of things they've done in their career. And it's sort of a natural thing to separate in that way. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's my
Well, it is natural, but you have to keep in mind that it's individual with all of us. We're all different, and how the way couples get along and how they've worked it out. After living together for like 30 years, you do know the person, and you know exactly what would make them angry. You would know how to push their buttons and put them into a fury, but you also know what they really like, and you're able to then do the nice things, and that's love. So you're right that for many of us, I think we have a time when we're alone in our marriage. There are things we do. My wife doesn't go swimming with me. She says that she loves swimming, but she just doesn't like water.
Yeah, but thank you. The alone time is very important for each of us. That doesn't mean we are lonely. There's a difference between being alone and lonely. Even together, I can be very lonely, and being alone, I am not lonely at all. So alone time is for each of us. We need that time. Thank you.
Yeah. And the more we use our mind for the present moment to analyze where we are, who we are, what we're doing, what makes us lonely, what makes us feel this way or that way, the better off we are. That helps us. We don't have to just sit there and just be like a zombie or let things happen. We're not victims. Being aged does not mean you're a victim. You can be a victor. You can be an overcomer at whatever age. And there's nothing, I don't know about you, but all my life I've been thrilled by old people who were overcomers. People who were able to live into their 80s and 90s and to do it victoriously. Just absolutely the world's best. So we who are now in our, what are we, in our 60s, 50s, we will have that opportunity too, to grow old and to show ourselves off to the world. Look at our president. He's no spring chicken. So just because you're old, you don't have to throw the towel in. I still swim the 200 butterfly, and last weekend I was in Montana at the Montana State Championships, and I swam the 200-yard butterfly, and I was the only person in the whole meet that would do it. Nobody else of any age would do it because they think it's insane, because it's so hard. But you see, when you make up your mind and you put your mind to it, and you can do whatever you want, even if you're old. It's the same. What's that? Yes, first and last. I was first and last, so I got the gold medal because there's no one else swimming it. And in a week, or on October 1st, I will then be declared fourth in the nation in the 200-meter butterfly, because unless somebody in the next week swims it faster than me. They just can't swim it. 3 or 4 people in the United States do it. I'm like a dog and pony show. People come out just to see this old man do the 200 butterfly, because the young men can't do the 200 butterfly. So we can be victorious. We don't have to just sit at home and sit on the couch and say, I'm too old, I'm no good to anybody, there's nothing I can do. Hey, life is our cherry, it's our plum, it's out there, just go for it. And that is the proof to me of the eternality of my soul. My body might be getting old, but my soul isn't. And the way I know that is that my spirit is just as bright and just as interested in the world and in nature and in life as when I was 20. My spirit hasn't gotten old. It's just this body I'm living in. It's wearing out. And I'm getting tired of it wearing out. But nothing I can do about that. All right, so that's the presentation, and we'll see you next time, and it'll be a session on how faith will help us as we age. Thank you.